will lead us in a prayer. Please remain standing for the pledge upon the completion.
Good and gracious God, look upon this gathering and send your Spirit to awaken all of our hearts, first and foremost, a thankful heart for the freedom to gather peacefully today. So many throughout the world, most notably in Ukraine, but other places, are fighting this day, laying down their life for this privilege and right. What seems to us ordinary is extraordinary. Open our hearts to remember the sacrifices that have been made for us over the years to come together to do the work of the people. May this give a particular gravitas to the work that we do. Guide our deliberations so that our working together gives honor to those who have gone before us in this building, and also gives honor to our democratic and representative process of governance. Loving God, bless this body with the wisdom needed to solve difficult and seemingly impossible challenges. May all actions and decisions be made with compassion and care for the most vulnerable. Bless this work of governance with civility, respect, and an openness to good and fair compromise. Lord, let despair and indifference find no place here, but may our hearts be filled with hope, the hope that comes from good men and women working together for the good of the people of Louisiana. Bring, O Lord, success to the work of our hands. We pray this to our God who redeems us, leads us in the truth, and lives forever and ever. Amen.
Please join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of Louisiana, the Honorable John Bell Edwards.
Thank you, Bishop Duca, for that beautiful prayer. All too often, our world is filled with unrest. And right now, our prayers are especially with the people of Ukraine as they defend their homes, their families, and their freedom. And today, we are happy to be joined by Eddie Hayes, who is the Honorary Consul of Ukraine. He represents the economic and cultural interests of the country here in Louisiana. And I asked him to be here today in hopes that he will relay our unified support to his colleagues in Ukraine. Eddie, would you please stand and be recognized? I know we all looked at the balcony, but Eddie's over here. Eddie, thank you very much for being here. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the legislature, my fellow Louisianans, it is an honor to be back in this chamber after delivering last year's speech off-site due to COVID. You don't need me to tell you that we've been through a lot over these past 2 years, navigating the pandemic and multiple natural disasters. I've always been one to count my blessings, but now, like you, I suspect, I cherish the time spent with loved ones even more, especially my children, Samantha Bell, Sarah Ellen, and John Miller, and my beautiful wife and best friend, Donna, who I've enjoyed being married to for 33 years now. I want to thank you. Like me, I know that many of you sacrificed seeing loved ones in order to keep them safe. And unfortunately, we've all lost people dear to us because of COVID-19. We've lost people who should be in this room with us right now. It was exactly 2 years ago today that we marked the first death from COVID-19 in Louisiana. Since then, over 16,800 Louisianans have died. More than 1.2 million cases have been confirmed. But a lot has changed. We have safe and effective vaccines that are saving countless lives. We have better therapeutic treatments. High-quality masks are now practical options for families. And cases and hospitalizations have been steadily dropping since we emerged from the Omicron-fueled surge this winter. Parades rolled again this Mardi Gras, and that is certainly a Louisiana breeze of hope. On March 11, 2020, I signed a public health emergency for COVID-19. And while it changed over time to reflect the ebb and flow of the pandemic, it has remained in effect since then. This Wednesday, 2 days from now, the order expires. And after 24 months, I will not be renewing it. This decision was certainly not made lightly. I have met with the Division of Administration, GOSEP, the Department of Health, and the Louisiana National Guard to ensure that there will be no federal aid repercussions or other adverse consequences from not reviewing the proclamation. And just because the proclamation is expiring, it doesn't mean that COVID is over. And if the circumstances worsen and call for it, I won't hesitate to declare another emergency. But God willing, we will never have to see such difficult mitigation measures in our state again. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that we are in a much better place today than we were 2 years ago. And I'll also tell you that that's due in large part to the healthcare heroes around the state of Louisiana, and also the stalwart team at the Louisiana Department of Health, including State Health Officer Dr. Joe Kenner and Secretary Dr. Courtney Phillips. They may be weary. They may be weary, but they never wavered in their efforts to save lives. I will also tell you that we are in a much better place today than we were 6 years ago. At my first State of the State, I had just inherited a $1 billion budget deficit to close out that fiscal year and a $2 billion deficit for the year that started July 1st, 2016. Today, as I stand here before you, we have hundreds of millions in surplus, even more in current year excess, and billions in federal funding through the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It all adds up to a historic opportunity to transform our state through pivotal investments in every level of education, infrastructure projects that for decades have been pipe dreams, long overdue pay raises for some of our most dedicated workers, and combating the effects of climate change. It all adds up to a once-in-a-generation opportunity to shape our future, and we must take advantage of it. It's not an exaggeration to say that the choices that will be made this session over these next 3 months will have a lasting legacy for the state. We have to get this right. Shaping the future always begins with education. So the budget I have proposed includes $31.7 million for faculty pay raises in higher education, $10.5 million for the MJ Foster Promise Program Fund created by President Cortez just last year, $97.2 million for higher education, and that includes $5 million for Title IX offices across the state, $15 million increase in GO grants, and $25 million into the Higher Education Initiatives Fund. And for early childhood education, an additional investment of $43.4 million, including more than $17 million for the LA4 Early Childhood Program, and $148.4 million for teacher and support staff pay raises, which is at least a $1,500 raise for teachers and $750 for support staff. We haven't done all that we would have liked, but this will be the 5th teacher pay raise since I've been governor. However, I believe that working together during this session, we can do even better. And that's why I'm recommending that the first $50 million of any increase in the revenue forecast that the REC may recognize before the budget is passed go to increasing teacher raises to $2,000. It is the least that we can do. It is the least that we can do for the people who never gave up on our students despite unprecedented circumstances. And it continues our goal of getting teacher pay up to at least the Southern regional average. My budget also includes a $12 per diem increase for intermediate care facilities for people living with intellectual disabilities. The funding will be used to support direct service workers in the medical field. Unfortunately, turnover in this field is high, especially over the past 2 years because of COVID. The pay is unacceptably low, and the work is very difficult. But that hasn't stopped Shalika Harvey, who is a certified health manager and direct service worker at Terrebonne Arc in Houma. She is here with us today. Shalika helps take care of 6 women, cooking, cleaning, making sure they take their prescribed medications, and providing companionship, which can be just as important as medical assistance. Shalika says she cares for the residents as if they are her own family, and seeing them smile makes her day. So, Ms. Shalika, please stand so the chamber can welcome you. And now you should direct your attention to the balcony. There are many other direct support workers like Shalika who understand how important their jobs are, and they want to stay in those jobs. But at the end of the day, they have to be able to pay their bills. They deserve so much more than this modest raise, but I hope that it can be a step towards change. We are also including a $100 per month supplemental pay increase for eligible first responders, which includes law enforcement officers and firefighters. Here in Louisiana, we need to put an end to this talk about defunding the police. We can never adequately compensate the men and women who put their lives on the line for public safety. However, it is important that we have the ability to recruit, train, and retain the best of the best in law enforcement. They deserve it, and the public deserves it. All the items I've mentioned so far are recurring expenditures. Thus, no one-time dollars are proposed to fund these investments. But we do have a momentous opportunity this year to commit one-time dollars to one-time expenditures. Most notably, we're going to invest in infrastructure unlike any time in our history. Roads, bridges, ports, railways, water and sewage systems, orphan wells, broadband, and so much more. And they all need our attention. And with the funds from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the American Rescue Plan, and our normal capital outlay program, we will make meaningful progress on mega projects and deferred maintenance projects that have been sitting on a shelf for decades. The longer it takes, the more expensive they become, and the more our citizens lose confidence in their elected leadership. My proposal also includes more than $1.1 billion in funding for critical infrastructure, such as $500 million for a new Mississippi River Bridge here in Baton Rouge, an additional, I'm glad you like that, an additional $100 million for the I-10 bridge in Lake Charles, and $500 million more for water and sewer improvements across our state. These dollars are being strategically placed to best leverage federal dollars for Louisiana. And I know that we're all tired of the jokes about knowing you're in Louisiana when the roads get bad. Every state is struggling to update their infrastructure. And I can tell you that here in Louisiana, since becoming governor, we've invested nearly $4.7 billion in projects, including 6,312 miles of our highways in order to change that narrative. And we have made significant progress. But the funds we are receiving from the federal government will allow us to catapult big ticket projects from talk to action. My budget proposal also dedicates $550 million in American Rescue Plan funding to replenish Louisiana's Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, which had been funded at historically high levels prior to the pandemic. We didn't just pull this number out of the air. That's what's going to be required to meet the solvency goal by September that we have in state law. Some folks may ask why this is a priority. Well, I think we know our businesses are still recovering from the pandemic. If we don't replenish the trust fund, it will automatically trigger an increase in taxes on all businesses in the state, big and small, which pay into the trust fund. And that is the last thing that they need right now. And the American Rescue Plan funds were given to us for this very purpose, to take care of those expenditures that were caused by the pandemic in the first place. So altogether, this is a balanced budget. It is responsible, transformational, and it continues my administration's practice of using only one-time dollars for one-time expenditures. It's a promise I made 6 years ago, and one that I have not deviated from. Simply put, we are not going back to the days of deficits, fiscal cliffs, and one-time dollars for recurring expenditures. And we will continue to be focused on empowering families and communities for the future. It's also with a focus on the future that we are working to eliminate the digital divide, a goal that I have set to accomplish by 2029. In this day and age, internet is something most of us take for granted, but there are far too many Louisianans, especially in rural communities, who still don't have access, can't afford it, or lack digital literacy. A strong internet structure is essential to economic competitiveness, access to health care, educational opportunities, and an overall better quality of life. That's why my administration worked so closely with Representative Desatel just last year to create the Granting Unserved Municipalities Broadband Opportunities Grant Program, or the GUMBO program for short. That's much easier to say, and I think we all like gumbo. But you're going to like this program too, because it will total hundreds of millions of dollars. It will provide grants to facilitate the deployment of broadband infrastructure, connecting more than 471,000 unserved residents in our state. And I will tell you, we are just getting started. The rest of my legislative package is also about transforming our future for the people of our state. And that includes ensuring that the citizens of this state are fairly represented. As y'all know, we just ended the redistricting session, an opportunity that only comes once every decade. As I've often said, the voters should be choosing their leaders. Leaders should not be picking and choosing their voters. Partisanship and self-interest cannot rule the day. Voting is one of the most important and cherished rights and responsibilities of all Americans. It is disappointing and unfortunate, in my view, that the end result of the special session did not reflect what is right and fair and what is required by the Voting Rights Act. The current demographic makeup of our state shows that the percentage of African American population has grown over the last 10 years. And yet, while numerous maps were filed reflecting this growth, none of these maps made it to my desk. In my view, the most egregious case is the congressional map, because there are half as many majority-minority districts as the law, basic fairness, and I believe basic math require. Therefore, as you know, I vetoed the congressional bill. The legislature undertook 5 separate redistricting efforts, a total of 163 districts. And across those 5 bills and 163 districts, there's not one net new majority black district anywhere. The African American voting age population in the state is 31.2%, basically a third of our population. And it's likely more because, according to a recent report from the U.S. Census Bureau, the black population was undercounted. And I don't believe we should need a court to tell us how to do basic math. 1/3 of 6 is 2. Our children are watching us. In fact, many took part in the process to make their voices heard. pleading that the right thing be done. We must think beyond ourselves and focus on their future, the future of our state, and the place they want to continue to call home. Having personally witnessed the redistricting process twice now, I can say that the process isn't working. That's why I'm supporting legislation to establish an independent redistricting commission to support the legislature in reapportionment for future redistricting. 18 other states have some type of commission, and I really believe we should be the 19th. And now, if you don't agree with me, if you think the current process is sufficient, then I invite you to prove me wrong. Pass a map this session that accurately reflects the current demographic makeup of our state for Congress. I mentioned earlier the proposed increase for supplemental pay for law enforcement officers, something that I believe is important to attract and retain the people who are keeping us safe. But an important part of that effort needs to be ensuring that those officers can be true partners with our communities and have the trust of the public. And let me be clear, the overwhelming majority of our law enforcement officers are professionals, and they are excellent public servants who work hard every day to protect and serve. But we know that we need to do more to hold the very few officers who violate that trust accountable. I intend to support several bills in this session that will do just that, including a package bill that would clarify the criminal law of malfeasance in office to apply to violations of constitutional civil rights, and to provide for revocation of post-certification if an officer is found to have committed such an offense. And I know these discussions will be difficult, but I also know they are absolutely necessary. Another system that is broken is the way our citizens are treated in the aftermath of a natural disaster, which unfortunately here in Louisiana happens way too often. The federal government still hasn't allocated sufficient funds for Louisiana to recover from hurricanes Laura, Delta, and Ida. And remember, 2 of those hurricanes were in 2020. And while I probably shouldn't say this because I know Mama's watching, it's a damn shame that they haven't. When I talk to people in DC, they tell me that more aid is coming, and I believe it will. But I don't blame folks for feeling like they've been left behind. Let's be clear though, it's not just a federal problem. Recent disasters have exposed the unacceptable ways our neighbors are being taken advantage of when they are at their most vulnerable. Suffering damage due to a natural disaster is life-altering, and yet there are landlords who have used it as an opportunity for a cash grab. So I'm supporting legislation by Representative Landry that is bipartisan support and emulates that of other Southern conservative states that will strengthen tenant protections in the aftermath of a disaster. Many of the reported evictions after Laura and Ida were illegal, but there are no meaningful repercussions to discourage landlords from proceeding with wrongful evictions. We're going to change that. We all know what it's like when we have to make the difficult decision to temporarily leave our homes because of a storm. Imagine being evicted simply because you chose to keep your family safe. It's also unacceptable that many residents are more scared of their insurance companies than of the storm itself. Carrie Anderson has a beautiful historic home in Lake Charles that was destroyed by hurricanes Laura and Delta. After 18 months, she is still battling her insurance company to force them to pay even a fraction of what she is owed. And by the way, Carrie is also a breast cancer patient. Her sole focus right now should be on fighting cancer, not fighting with their insurance company. In Southeast Louisiana, Peggy Honore, who teaches at LSU School of Public Health, had 5 insurance adjusters in just the first 12 weeks after Ida destroyed her home in Destrehan. How is that even remotely possible or acceptable? Unfortunately, Carrie and Peggy are far from the only ones left in insurance purgatory. There are thousands of other families across South Louisiana and business owners as well who have been left in the lurch. Pat's of Henderson is an iconic seafood restaurant that opened its doors in Lake Charles in 1977. I can tell you from personal experience, the food there is exceptional. The day after Hurricane Laura made landfall, owner Nick Priu hired a contractor so that he could get the restaurant back up and running as soon as possible. Instead, he struggled with his insurance company until November of last year. Had his payments been made on time, the restaurant would have reopened by the end of 2020. Instead, it's slated to reopen this June, close to 2 years after the storm. And I can't wait to go back and eat there again when it does open. Vineyard Christian Fellowship Church of Lake Charles has a similar story. Co-pastor George Rodriguez wasn't able to get the insurance benefits the church was entitled to until last summer. In the meantime, worship service was held in their outdoor pavilion in the sweltering Louisiana heat. The church's facilities still aren't back to 100%. These stories have happened too often to too many people all across South Louisiana. So Carrie, Peggy, Nick, Pastor George, on behalf of all similarly situated Louisianans, would you please stand and be recognized? Ladies and gentlemen, we have to hold insurance companies more accountable. My legislative package includes a number of bills focused on hurricane deductibles, claims transparency, enforcing insurance fraud laws against bad actors, revamping the adjuster registry so that policyholders can verify their adjusters, and stopping mortgage companies from withholding insurance money from homeowners without good reason. And I am not limiting my support to only the bills in my own package. Many bills of a similar nature have been filed this session, which signals how much of a problem this really is across our state. And I'll look forward to working with all of you on what should be a very bipartisan issue. Insurance is a wonderful thing when it functions as intended. Unfortunately, companies don't always work in good faith with homeowners. And all we're asking is that those homeowners and business owners get the benefit of the premium dollars paid, and that the insurance companies play by the rules. We're all having to adapt to a changing environment, one where storms are getting stronger and more frequent. We don't get to dictate when the next storm hits or how bad it's going to be, but we can work to mitigate the impacts of climate change. That's why I established the Climate Initiatives Task Force and set a goal of reaching net zero by 2050. This task force, which includes scientists, academics, industry leaders, and environmentalists, has adopted a statewide climate action plan. What makes our plan special and the most attainable, in my opinion, is that instead of working against oil and gas companies, we're working with them. In this state, that will look like offshore oil platforms and wind turbines side by side. In fact, many oil companies have already pledged to reach similar net zero goals. Additionally, combating climate change is just as much about economic development as it is about anything else. Some of our biggest economic development projects recently have been with companies focused on clean energy. Growing Fuels here in Baton Rouge is planning $9.2 billion renewable fuel investment at the port. Air Products plans to build a $4.5 billion blue hydrogen facility in Ascension Parish. There's a $1.1 billion expansion of a green diesel plant in Norco in St. Charles Parish. And the Shell Convent refinery, too, may get a second life making low-carbon fuels. And in North Louisiana, in Caldwell Parish, we announced plans for Louisiana Green Fuels, a $700 million renewable diesel refinery. And these are just a few. And just these projects alone add up to more than 1,000 permanent jobs and many thousands of construction jobs. If you think that clean energy doesn't equal jobs, you just couldn't be more wrong. Just 2 weeks ago, the first offshore wind lease sale in New York brought in more than $4.3 billion. That's billion with a B. It's estimated that those wind leases will power millions of homes. We're scheduled to have the first ever wind lease sale in the Gulf Coast early next year. And as we can see from legislation filed by Representatives Zerang and Orgeron, there's strong interest in wind energy development here in Louisiana on both sides of the aisle. There's also strong interest in wind energy development in Louisiana waters from stakeholders, our state waters. So this is the future that I've been talking about. We have to harness it. And we can either get on board or we can get left behind. Ultimately, our motivation for advancing clean energy should be preserving the land we are so very blessed to call home, and also so that we can make sure that Louisiana will not be washed away. Finally, I can't leave this podium without yet again making a plea for you to do the right thing and raise the minimum wage and reduce the gender pay gap. There is not... And I really believe this. There's not a person in this room who can tell me with a straight face that $7.25 an hour, the minimum wage from 13 years ago, is fair or acceptable, especially given the current rate of inflation. 21 other states have increased their minimum wage, including Arkansas and Florida. And yet every year, efforts to raise the minimum wage here in Louisiana, even very modestly or very gradually, fail. As a result, we are failing our workers and our families who deserve better. And so do women. That's why I'm supporting legislation again to enact pay transparency. It's certainly not a silver bullet solution, but it is a simple measure that can make a meaningful difference in reducing the gender pay gap. And that too will benefit families that need it most across Louisiana. So let's make this the session we finally take action on the issues that matter most to the people of Louisiana. Some of the bills that are being brought up this session, they really don't do anything to make lives better. They don't continue to move us forward. They do, however, serve to divide us. And frankly, some are reminiscent of a dark past that we should have learned from and not relive. You know the old saying, if these walls could talk. Well, these walls do talk. History remembers what happens in this building. And the issues we spend the most time on signal to the public what we value the most. So I ask simply, what do you value most? And perhaps more importantly, who do you value most? As I think all of you know, my faith is very important to me. It is the foundation that guides me as I strive every day to be a better leader and a better person. I was fortunate enough when I was growing up to have the hardest catechism teacher there was, my mom. And those lessons have stayed with me. And as I contemplate the work that I want us to accomplish together in the last 2 years of this term, I am drawn to Christ's Sermon on the Mount and to the Beatitudes. You all know them. Here are just a few of my favorites. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. As we enter this session, as you consider the many issues that will be discussed from this very spot, I want you to really reflect on the people of this great state, our neighbors, as their spirits are broken, as they mourn 2 years of loss and hardship, our children with their meek and pure hearts, our moms, the most merciful and blessed of all. Our time in office is fleeting, but the decisions we make while here will last generations. I'm asking that we use this time wisely. And I'll leave you with my favorite. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. In a world that is too much hatred, strife, and currently war, let us be bold enough to be peacemakers. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Louisiana. Thank you.